Hey up everybody, welcome to the Aldo Cycling YouTube channel. I'm going to be previewing the Vuelta Andalucia Ruta Del Sol today. This is going to be a 5-stage race in Spain, and it looks like going to be a really difficult affair with lots of mixed terrain. Stage 1, there is quite a few hills to start with, and also most importantly there's some hills towards the end. There's 8 kilometres at 3.7%, and then 1.3 kilometres at 7%, and then roughly a kilometre at 7-8% to finish off. It's going to be a really difficult finale, and there's going to be lots of riders who can contest this. If it came down just to a pure kind of puncher on puncher, you have to say that Valverde and Cosnefroy are likely the main favourites for this. You also have the possibility of somebody attacking on that second to last hill towards the end. And you've got teams here like Bahrain and Bora Hansgrohe who would perhaps favour that, considering they don't have the most punchy of riders. Bahrain could easily send off somebody like Luis Leon Sanchez, or maybe even Gino Mader, whereas Bora could send off Leonard Kemner, or perhaps even like a Wilco Kelderman. But when it comes down to it, I think that this will likely be too hard for Ghirmay. I think a lot of people will be expecting him to perhaps survive this, but from the Mallorca challenge what we saw is that he's good at reduced bunch sprints, not necessarily the steeper uphill finishes like this. Of course there are some other riders who I'd be expected to do well here. You've got Maxime Van Hills and Andrea Bajoli, who were kind of going head to head at the Saudi Tour just over a week ago. You may also have Mike Woods and Jakob Fuglsang from Israel Primotek, both renowned riders when it comes to this sort of punchy terrain. Or maybe even somebody like Miguel Angel Lopez or Alexei Luksenko could be a good pick as well. But for me, I think it's going to be Cosnefroy versus Valverde. For me, I see that Cosnefroy being the slightly sharper rider when it comes to a finish like this. So I'm going to go with Benoit Cosnefroy to win stage 1 of the Ruta del Sol. Stage 2 finishes up the Alcalá de la Real, which is the stage which Ethan Hayter won last year. In this race he dropped a load of other riders. It's the kind of cobbled climb, very kind of narrow street finish, and this will ultimately decide some gaps on GC. Not massive, but definitely some. Cosnefroy would perhaps be a good option for this, but I consider the day to be very hilly throughout, so therefore Cosnefroy will be a little bit tired towards the end. I think that this suits Valverde a lot more. But you also have a lot of the other riders that I mentioned in the previous stage. So you got Van Hills, Bajoli, even like the climbers like Lopez would be an incredibly good pick here as well. Maybe even Simon Yates, Emmanuel Buchmann, Mike Woods, etc. But for me, I think that Valverde is likely going to be the winner of this, and there will be some time gaps on GC to some of the other favourites, somebody like Carlos Rodriguez, for example. I think that Valverde will likely pick up this stage. It does suit him a lot. Stage 3 has, weirdly enough, one of the higher probabilities of being somewhat of a bunch sprint, especially since the first half is relatively hilly, but as long as the peloton keeps it relatively steady, a lot of the faster men will remain in the peloton. But it is by no means an easy day, which is why you don't see a lot of sprinters here. The fastest ones will be Ghirmay, maybe even like Cosnefroy, honestly. Matteo Trentin would be another one. But you also have perhaps Stefano Oldani. Sepp van Mark has shown some pretty good pace recently as well. Maybe Edvald Boasson-Hagen as well. However, due to his performance at the Mallorca Challenges earlier in the season, I'm going to go with Biniam Ghirmay to win this stage. It's got to kind of drag up to a finish which could be very representative of stage 1 of the Giro for this year, so this could be very good practice for Intermarché and Ghirmay to try and see if he can succeed on this kind of finish. Stage 4 also looks like it's likely to be more of a reduced bunch sprint. In fact, this parcours reminds me a lot of the GP, the Marseillaise. It was one of the first races of the season. Of course, we saw Cosnefroy doing really well there. Edvald Boasson-Hagen finished on the podium there too. And you'll also see Ghirmay likely contesting the finish of this stage as well. Whether an attacker could go early on those climbs is ultimately very possible. Perhaps somebody with a good time trialling kind of capability like Lutsenko could be a good option. You could also have Matteo Sobrero could be a decent option as well. Yannick Steimler for Quick Step Alpha Vinyl, especially since if it will come back to a bunch sprint, Badgioli probably won't be winning that, so attacking with another rider might make a lot more sense. You also have another sprinter who I have forgot to mention so far, and that is Corbin Strong of Israel Premier Tech. He could also be up there as well. But just because of how similar this looks to the GP Marseillaise, I am going to go with Edvald Boasson Hagen to win stage 4 of the Ruta del Sol, just because he has done this kind of terrain before very recently and he did very well on it, and he also looked really good at the Etoile de Passage the other week, so I'm going to go with Edvald to win stage 4. Stage 5 is kind of what you'd call the Queen stage, just because of the hill towards the end, 6.4 kilometres at 5.6%. By no means the trickiest climb in the world, but it will cause some gaps on GC, and just because of how not easy it is, but it's an easier climb, I think that you'll see some attacks going kind of early with perhaps some benefit of a draft. I expect a couple of riders to perhaps attack away who are a bit further down on GC. Valverde will likely, I think, be in the lead of GC at this point and will play quite a defensive game, but I think the riders who need to attack will perhaps not be very punchy from the previous stages, so somebody like Carlos Rodriguez or Pello Bilbao or Emmanuel Buchmann, those kind of riders I think need to attack early, so I expect them to form some kind of group. Could also see like Kirby Gosens for Intermarché, who's looking really good at the moment. He could also be a threat for the win here, but I think that Carlos Rodriguez of the INEOS Grenadiers will win this stage and put in some time into the likes of Valverde. But you could also see maybe Mario Van Zevenant, Andrea Badgioli doing well here as well, Mike Woods, Jakob Fuglsang, Ben O'Connor. There's so many riders here who could do well on GC that it's really hard to call who's going to win this. But in terms of my GC podium for this race, I expect Carlos Rodriguez to win this race after winning stage 5 and consistently putting in some good performances on the other punchy finishes. Second place, I think that Valverde will just about lose it to Rodriguez on that last stage. And then I think in third place will be somebody like Pello Bilbao or Emmanuel Buchmann, but I will stick my neck out and say that Bilbao will finish in third place just because he has done well in these kind of early season Spanish stage races before, so I think that he is fairly likely to do well here. That is my preview of the Vuelta a Andalucia Ruta del Sol. All that's left to say is keep safe out there, and I'll speak to you in the next video. Salut!